Welcome to the Bold Life Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Rich, and each week I bring you inspiring stories from real people to help you live a more passionate and intentional life. You'll learn how to up-level in everything from relationships, entrepreneurship and leadership, to spirituality, sexuality, and yes, even money. If you're interested in raising your game to be a better business owner, a better lover, and a happier, more fulfilled human, then you're in the right place. No more living on autopilot. You are just an episode away from a bolder, better, more fulfilling life. Welcome back to episode number 82. I have been waiting with bated breath to release this episode. It is hands down one of my favorite interviews that I've ever recorded. Today's guest is Miss Jaiya. Welcome back to the Bold Life Movement. I am super excited because today I am talking with the one and only Jaiya. Jaiya, welcome to the show.
Hello, so excited. I love doing podcasts and I love being here, and I'm so excited to just share this time with you.
Yeah, so if you're not watching on YouTube, definitely tune in. You can see Jaiya's beautiful face and her lovely earrings. And I am really excited to dive into today's topic because as I let my followers know already that this interview is coming up, and I think it's so important that we understand building a better, bigger, bolder life includes having better sex. And I feel like step one to doing that is having some self-awareness. So we'll get more into how to do that and your erotic blueprint later in the episode. But first, I want to get a better understanding of how you even got into this space. How did your career as a somatic sexologist begin?
It began really young. So I grew up in Ohio, and when I was little, I told my parents that I wanted to be Dr. Ruth. I don't know if everybody knows who Dr. Ruth is, but she's still kicking it.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Educator. She's amazing. I just saw her last year. And I had this, it was like, how some people are just really gifted at like music, or some people are really gifted at counting, and that's the way they were as a kid. I feel like I came in kind of like with this erotic gift. And of course, telling your parents, hey, I want to like teach sex for a living. I told them instead I wanted to become a fertility doctor, because at that time that seemed a lot more acceptable than being a sexuality educator, but that I really wanted to be Dr. Ruth when I grew up. So that it began, I started taking classes and all of this the moment I turned 18. Like I could not wait to turn 18 so that I could start working in the industry and in the field of sexuality.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And so what's an example of a class or a workshop that you took?
So I started studying, I was doing a lot of holistic healing stuff. So a lot of like stuff around energy. I was doing dance. So I started belly dancing even before I took 18. So I was like I really loved like the goddess and femininity. And so I was doing a lot of that stuff before I even turned 18, of like Reiki healing or, exotic dancing or ethnic dancing, like some of these very feminine but yet sensual types of movements in my own body. That became very important. And then I started studying Tantra at the age of 19, and that was my really big introduction. And I knew within a year I wanted to be a teacher. So I started taking the teacher training, and that was kind of my first really the background in Tantra and Tantric studies, and learning some of the Western Tantra versus, ancient traditions. And I just immersed myself. And that's always my style, is this, if I'm going to learn something, I'm in an immersion model. I just dive in and devour everything. I become obsessed.
Yeah.
And then I have to teach it, because then it gets in my bones and I've really got the information embodied.
Yeah. And this is definitely something that I've taken away from Tony Robbins events, is like, if you have something that you're passionate about, something that you want to become better in, you need to immerse yourself. You need to find someone who can teach you, who can be that mentor, and then full immersion. And so who were some of those initial mentors for you? Who were these teachers that you were looking to?
Yeah, Bodhi Avanasha was one. She has a book called Jewel and the Lotus, which was kind of like my Bible for a while.
And we'll have that in the show notes.
Read that book so many times. So she was a big teacher to me, the whole Ipsalo Tantra community. And there were teachers within there that were like my mom and dad, kind of became like my family. So that was a big influence. And then when I started looking at Western sexuality, a man named Joseph Kramer, who's just so near and dear to my heart. He started sexological body work and somatic sexology, like some of the things that really became key and somewhat of where the blueprints, which we're going to talk about, came out of, was training in the sexological bodywork world. And then in sexual energetics, I studied with a man called Kenneth Ray Stubbs, the sexual shaman. And so it was like sexuality and shamanic training, and like not even he's in a wheelchair, so he was learning how to develop his eroticism completely energetically without needing a physical. So how do you have orgasms without touching someone? Like that kind of like, the Jedi Knight stuff of sexuality, which is really, really fun.
Yeah, I'm an energetic, so I'm like, tell me more.
So you're an energetic.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yep. Which I would have guessed before taking the quiz, but having that reassurance and like understanding where I fell, which we'll get into with the blueprints, where I fell with the rest of, the archetypes or the blueprint, however you refer to it, it just gave me so much more clarity. So are you familiar with, going back to some of the mentors, are you familiar with Margot Anand?
I am familiar with Margot Anand.
Yeah. So another friend... Yes, sex magic, exactly. Another friend recently introduced me to her book, The Art of Sexual Magic, I think is what it's called. And for me, it's like I'm just opening that door into understanding Tantra and energy and magic and how that all plays together. So it's really fun. And I feel like this podcast episode is an opportunity for people who have heard of none of this stuff to kind of start to dip their toe. Like, what's a blueprint? What's energetic? So one question I really wanted to understand is, like, for me, sex is everywhere. You see it everywhere. Cosmopolitan, sex sells, etc. So why do you think that things like the Erotic Blueprint are not completely mainstream yet?
Yeah, I ask myself that question all the time.
Yeah, like, why is this not on the cover of Cosmo?
Name that people know more about their own sexuality. It's really fascinating because in our culture and in the business of sexuality, you can have a billboard that, is selling something that has like someone naked holding a gun. Mm-hmm. So we've got eroticism and violence like mixed together, selling like a product. So it's this really interesting thing, and that's okay. But I get banned from YouTube for sitting just like I am right now, talking honestly about sex. Or, we can't advertise on Facebook. Like, it's really hard. And this is why I just ask every community, like, if this inspires you, please share it, because it is very challenging to get our voice out around this. And look, especially female sexuality. And we've got the Me Too movement. We've got some things, like really interesting things happening right now around feminine eroticism. And I think we are starting to get more of a voice, and that is going to start to change things. But the voice of sexuality, especially like really authentic sexuality and these deeper topics, gets shut down a lot. And we have a history of that. Look back throughout history around women speaking up and being bold about sexuality. We will find lots of persecution.
Totally.
We will find, imprisonment. We will find torture. We will find, if we look back on it, our voices have been shut down around sexuality, and it continues to be so. It's just different. Like Facebook won't allow us to advertise. That it's not like, I'm being burned at the stake, but I can't get, it's challenging. I won't say I can't get, because we have our little ways,
Yeah.
But I think as a community, it's time for us to come together, because that's the way that the conversation, the information actually gets out. And that's how we change the face of sexuality. Mm-hmm. It's the power of our collective voices saying, this is not okay. I will have my voice. And let me tell you the truths that I've come to understand around sexuality, so that we create that community and that conversation. And that alone starts to heal the pain and shame and hiding and suffering that I truly feel is unnecessary, but we have so much because we don't talk about it, because we are shut down in the channels in which we can get messages out and really educate people.
Totally. And I mean, truthfully, it makes no sense in my head, because there are magazines like Maxim and Cosmo and Playboy where there are extremely adult conversations being had. Why is something that's like deeper and more authentic and more resonant not allowed? It's like it's not commercial enough or something.
Yes.
It it blows my mind. Hence my excitement to have you on the show, because I hurt when I have conversations with friends who have never had an orgasm with their partner, any partner ever. And there's no reason for that if they had these tools in their toolbox and if these tools became more accessible.
Right.
So,
or the disconnection between partners. I mean, that
right.
is a big focus of my career, is just helping couples. So you have this disconnect, but it's not that you're incompatible, which is often what's taught. It's really that you just speak different languages. So if I speak Spanish and my partner speaks English and we fall in love with each other, I don't say, hey, I can't be with you because we're incompatible as human beings. I say, no, let me learn Spanish. And he says, let me learn English. And that's a lot of what, it's actually very simple when it comes down to, as long as both of you are willing to learn to speak each other's erotic languages or erotic blueprints, therefore you can create change. As long as the willingness is there, you can create epic change and start really gaining the satisfaction and creating the connection and passion that you're really wanting to create in the bedroom.
Yeah, I love that you use the word erotic languages, because I call these like your sexual love languages when I'm telling friends, you got to go take this quiz. Like, what's your sexual love language? And I think that that's a great segue into starting to talk about the blueprint, because I'll just use my own life as an example here. I'm an energetic, with sensual being my second, and I have had past partners that were energetics, and it was amazing. It was easy. And I have had past partners where they were strongly sexual with energetic closer to the bottom. And I don't think that at first we felt compatible, but having a greater understanding of how to just tap into each other's erotic blueprint helped. So can you explain how you can progress and be compatible with someone who has like the opposite blueprint as you?
It's the golden question. And I think, we have this thing of opposites attract. We want to create polarity. And a way that we create polarity is by being attracted or finding someone who is the opposite of our blueprint. So energetics and sexuals. I see that matching a lot.
Yeah.
Or sensuals and sexual and like a shapeshifter, like that kind of stuff that happens. And I think we should probably at some point go through all of these so everybody knows.
Yeah, please feel free.
So just to give a little background and hearing this, some of you who are listening may be like, okay, that's me and that's my partner and we're different. Okay, now I really want the answer to that question. So the first is an energetic, and that's someone who's turned on by space, anticipation, and tease. They really like to long, yearn. They almost want to be begging before the next step happens. So orgasmic superpowers, or they can be orgasmic without being touched. Their body may, yeah, me too.
Hey girl, hey.
Shake, twitch during sex. They feel more than the average person. So the smallest, slightest things can bring turn on and pleasure when they're in their positive shadow aspects. And there are more of each one of these. I'm just, for time's sake, going to kind of give you cliff notes.
Totally.
But the shadow aspect is because of the hypersensitivity, they can short circuit. So if it's too much, too quick, too fast, and you're kind of overriding the body, there will be this, all the turn on kind of going off, or even a dissociation from the body where you kind of fly out of your body and don't remember what's going on, or don't start going numb, that kind of experience. They can also be very hierarchical, meaning I can have all these tricks, ha ha ha, like, or you watch porn, that's so base and disgusting, like I'll hear things like that come out of energetic, or you're in your lower chakras, like, and I used to be guilty of this. I was definitely like, you eat hamburgers and watch television.
Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely the television person.
We cannot have a television. I had a friend who had a television, and as soon as I would go over to his house, I would put a scarf over it. Like, I couldn't handle the electromagnetism from the TV. Well, also anesthetic, so.
I definitely have friends where if they have the TV on all the time, or they sleep with the TV on, I'm super judgy about it. So now at least I know why. Yes,
it's that hierarchical shadow of all the judgy that we get, because, we are hypersensitive humans. So there you go. So sensuals are the people who are turned on by all of their senses being ignited. So this might mean delicious smells, or something in your mouth that's just, oh, so yummy, or the beautiful environment, like just having a really beautiful environment can be very important. So sensuals are ignited by all of their senses being involved, but the senses need to be beauty. They bring beauty to the erotic experience. Superpowers are they can have non-genital orgasms. What does that mean? Like the back of your knee, or like, your neck is just licked in the right way. And something like kissing, like those things, head to toe, full body erotic experience is more important than a like flat on intercourse experience. They want it to be a cacophony of experience of all of those senses and delighting in all of those senses. So they can have orgasm from I had an orgasm once by chocolate that was dipped in something. I don't remember what it was, but the person put it in my mouth after a very sensual, I was blindfolded and there was a lot of touch and different sensations. Yeah. And when that chocolate went in my mouth, I started crying because I went into such ecstatic, just orgasm in my mouth. So it was
literal orgasm in your mouth.
Literal orgasm in my mouth. There is erectile tissue in the face. Yeah. A lot of people don't know there's erectile tissue in the face, but there is erectile tissue in the face.
I believe that. I had an ex give me one from touching my teeth, and anyone I share that with is mind blown, but it felt good.
It's true. And I do want to add for anybody who's listening who's like, well, but I don't experience that. If that's going on in your head, I just want you to know nothing's wrong with you. And as any of you are listening, I don't say any of these possibilities to make you feel like you're broken or wrong or bad. Everyone is normal. That's the biggest question. Am I normal? You're all normal. No, you are not broken. You're just wired differently. And no one taught you. No one said, hey, did you know you can have an orgasm from someone touching your teeth? You can, and here's how. Here's how to start wiring your body. Yeah. Or here's how to start developing that type of sensitivity in your nervous system. No one taught us how to do this. So it's not that you're broken. It's oftentimes that there's a lack of education to help you actually get to these different possibilities. And some of us just have it, an energetic's going to have that more naturally than the other blueprints.
And conversely, hearing of some of my friends' sexual encounters that were a lot rougher and more aggressive and, similar to what I experienced in my early 20s that I hated and they loved. I was like, what's wrong with me? I hate sex. Sex hurts. Sex is not pleasurable at all. I don't understand. But that's because I was doing it in a way that wasn't conducive to how I'm wired. I was doing it to how my partner was wired.
Yes.
Perhaps. But anyway,
exactly
continue.
What a lot of us do, because we don't know. We don't, we just don't have the information. And I hope that every college student gets this info, because can you imagine? I just couldn't even imagine having the sex education. I was lucky. I started very, very early.
Yeah.
I was the kid who told all my friends where babies came from. I started very early because I had a natural curiosity to read everything I could get my hands on. I read a lot of romance novels to get my sex education.
Yes.
So that where did you get your sex education from? We all got sex education. This is my argument. We all got sex education. It was just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Don't do it till after you're married. So I want everybody listening just to think where did I get my sex education from? Because you did get one. And what were the messages you got? Who did you get them from? What were the messages that you got when you were growing up? And I would say 99.9% of people got a sex education that was not a positive sex education.
Yeah, I would second that.
I see. Mm-hmm. So, okay, so we talked about energetic, sensual. Let's talk about sexual. Sexuals are 0 to 60. They're turned on by nudity, penetration. It's what our culture. You talk about Cosmo magazine and all of this stuff that we see out there. Why is that okay to be out there? That is because it's the cultural norm. The cultural norm is heteronormative, oftentimes, penis and vagina equals sex.
Yeah.
And so we have this very limited definition of what sex is, which is oftentimes penis and vagina. That means we've had successful sex as long as everybody got erect and wet and there was an orgasm at the end. That is good sex.
Typically by the male, or they'll talk about it being from the female, but not explaining how.
Exactly. So we have this kind of challenge in that we live in a sexual culture, but it doesn't take into account the other blueprint models that are there. So it's just fascinating to me that, hey, well, we have this kind of sex in a box, and sex is actually not something we can box and label. Even though we are using blueprints as a way of labeling, as a way of understanding more about ourselves, it is essentially a very complex model.
Yeah.
So sexuals are simple. So speaking of the opposite of complexity, it is simple, which is why we think it should be just simple. Like, what, you put slot A into slot B and you go do, and then like, what's the big deal? It's like pizza.
You
always good.
Sex.
It's it's very simple. Yes. And so that's the beauty though of the sexual, is that it is simple. It's like, okay, there doesn't have to be flowers and candles and romance and chocolate, or nor do we have to like approach them from 30 feet away very slowly and have blindfolds or handcuffs. Like it's just simple.
Yeah.
In many ways. And so that there can be something we can appreciate about that simplicity.
Yeah.
It can be 0 to 60. What'd you say?
I said they're not as needy. They have less needs.
Or we could just put it in terms of their needs are A and B. Whereas someone else's might be Z, F, and G. It's like music. And a sexual could play one note. They don't need a lot of the whole keyboard. So sexual superpowers are the simplicity is usually they're 0 to 60. They can get aroused very easily. Orgasm isn't quite elusive. Like in a sensual orgasm could be very elusive. I didn't talk about the shadows because sensuals get caught up in their head.
Yeah.
So I had a couple who was a sensual sexual couple, and her initiation of sex is, she's beautiful, like gorgeous model. And she would get on the bed and be naked, like on the bed. And he would walk in and he would see the socks on the floor.
Oh, he was the sensual.
She was the sexual and he was the sensual. And so he would see the socks on the floor and then he would start thinking about the laundry. And then he would think about like, oh, did I call that person back? And oh, I got to pick up the kids at such and such time. And all of his turn on is gone. And she's just like, what is the matter with my husband?
Yeah.
And so this misunderstanding of like, all she had to do was like kind of judge the room a little bit. And then that would make a big difference because then he could actually see the naked wife in the room and he wouldn't get caught in his head. Mm-hmm. So it's the shadow of the sensual being caught in the head, but the sexual is like, I don't understand. I'm naked. Why are you not aroused? Because we do have that expectation that all men are sexual, which is not what we've seen in 70,000 people taking the Erotic Blueprint Quiz, is that not all men are sexual. Actually, the majority of them are other blueprints. And there are a lot of female-bodied people who are sexual. I had that as my secondary for almost most of my life, I think. That's starting to change as I'm healing some things. Mm-hmm. So it's just really interesting. So the shadow of the sexual is selfish. The shadow of the sexual can be, I don't understand. We're all having orgasms. What's wrong with you? I hear this so often in my office where I have a partner who's sexual and says to the other one, well, none of my other partners were this way. You're the one who's broken. And ouchie. And that's because 76% of women fake orgasm. I mean, like it's very high. Men fake orgasms too. It's very high how many people fake orgasms. You're more likely to fake an orgasm when you're with a sexual partner because their ego is so tied up in get to that end goal. So people will fake it more. So then the sexual partner gets reinforced that everything's okay. So we've got to stop this faking thing.
I don't think I've ever faked in my entire life because I just can't imagine encouraging behavior that I don't like.
Exactly.
But but to be fair, that is why I am the creator of the Bold Life movement and not everyone else in the world, because I'm assertive, perhaps to a fault sometimes.
Cool. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm not a person who's ever faked it. It's hard for me to understand. But then when I start working with clients, I do understand because like an energetic is suffering through it and they don't speak up because they're not with boundaries. So then they're suffering through it. This is a shadow of the energetic, is not being good at speaking up about a boundary or saying, I need a pause or, those kinds of things. And so what happens is they just want to get it over quicker so that their sexual partner feels good about themselves. Yeah. And this pattern we have to stop to break. And you asked that question about what do I do if I have differing blueprints? That's one. You've got to start telling your partner, this is who I am. This is what I need. This is what I desire, because a lot of us aren't talking about sex. We just kind of grin and bear it, or we wait till I get it over, or we fake. We do all of this stuff to not stir the pot.
Yeah.
So it's time to stir the pot. That's what I'm saying. Now, you can do that gently. You can stir the pot gently. You don't want to like slosh it over the sides. Like, this is a gentle stir of the pot. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. Kinky. So kinky's next. So there are 5, in case anybody's wondering how many of these there are. Energetic, we went over. Sensual, sexual. Next one's kinky. And the kinky is turned on by anticipation, space, or sorry, I'm way to energetic. That's hilarious. Kinky is turned on by anything that is taboo. And that's anything that's taboo for you. Mm-hmm. So what's taboo for one person could be different than what's taboo for another. 50 Shades of Grey started opening kind of the box on power dynamics and power play and some of the kinky play that's there. I don't want people to mistake kinky for like, it has to be dark dungeons and red rooms and all of that. There are 2 different types of kinkies. One is the psychological. That means I'm turned on by a power game that happens in the mind. Mm-hmm. It doesn't involve any spanking, or, I mean, it can, but it doesn't involve, a lot of people think kinky equals pain. It doesn't have to ever involve any kind of sensation-based kink. So that's the second type, which is sensation-based. Those are people who love spanking, who like the choke, who want the hair pull, who love the constriction of the ropes. They like feeling the different sensations that come along with kinky play.
I do have a question about kinky.
Yeah.
I've taken the quiz a couple times, and as I mentioned, referred it to a lot of people. One thing that I didn't notice in it is, in the questions that sort of insinuate you will be kinky if you answer this way, is something along the lines of like, this is wrong. There's questions about power dynamics, and then obviously the handcuffs, choking, etc. But for me, I think that I may lean towards a more kinky situation if I thought like, this is naughty versus they're taking power over me and I'm submitting. Do you know what I mean?
So you're more of like the taboo rule breaker.
Yes.
Than feeling like I'm doing something bad wrong.
Yeah, well, no, I think that I would like the idea of I'm breaking the rules versus the idea of necessarily I'm submissive to this person.
Someone has power over me.
Yes. Yeah.
I see. So yeah, I mean that falls under the psychology of I'm doing something naughty. I've had the clients where they get tied up and all of a sudden they have more permission. To just do things because they're naughty things they wouldn't normally do, but because they're tied up.
Yeah.
And someone else is dominating them, then they can do those things that feel wrong, bad,
Yeah.
All of that. I could see you having kinky in your blueprint, like breaking the rules.
Thinking of like outside or locations that you're not supposed to be having sexual interactions, things like that. Hey, newsflash podcast listeners, I find those appealing. FYI, everyone who's listening to this, I'm into that. So yeah, and in my mind, I'm like, that if I had to pick one of the blueprints for me, I would think that that's kinky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could it also be sensual?
That falls under kinky, no, because sensual is more about sensation.
Okay.
Whereas kinky is, that's taboo.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm breaking a rule. Ooh, I probably shouldn't be having sex outside.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Yeah, that's a little kinky blueprint. So that falls more in the psychology because it's happening in your mind. Mm-hmm. It's something that's like, I think about it. I think about breaking that rule, or if I am breaking the rule, you're thinking like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, kind of thing. Yeah, so that falls into the psychology. And so one of the superpowers of the kinky can be having orgasmic experience or going into altered states of consciousness, similar to an energetic. It's kinky and energetic. The psychological kinky, especially, and energetic can go really, really well together because of that aspect. And so you can go into something called subspace, where you just kind of like, it's almost like a floaty feeling. It's like a very altered state of consciousness where you can be very orgasmic in that state. Your body's producing different endorphins and so on. So kinkies, just like energetics, can have orgasms without being touched. Without, they can have them from a sound.
Wow.
Or sudden happening. So kinkies can also have that kind of experience. Or they can transmute pain. I started using Kinky Blueprint when I go to the dentist. So I don't take the dentist numbing stuff. And I just start to translate pain into pleasure. Mm-hmm. how can you translate pain into pleasure? And that's just an interesting inquiry for people who have that wiring. And then the shadow side is shame of that. Like, oh, I feel shame because I like something that's taboo, or I like something that's naughty, or, I'm doing something kind of outside of the box. I must be wrong, or I'm not normal, or I'm weird. That's part of the shadow of the kinky. So the final one is the shapeshifter, and the shapeshifter is turned on by everything. So everything I just talked about, if you're like, yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. Oh, that's a little bit of me too. Yeah. That's usually a shapeshifter has all of them. So if you don't have kinky, but you had sexual and sensual and energetic, you're not quite a shapeshifter, but you may have some of the others. And the quiz will actually give you a percentage of each one that you are. So if you go take the quiz, that will show you exactly like you're this percentage or that percentage to go figure that all out.
And we'll have the quiz linked up in the show notes. I think that what is the specific URL?
eroticbreakthrough.com/bold life. There you go.
Take that quiz.
So shapeshifters, because they like everything, they want everything, they're turned on by everything. Their sexuality is just huge and voracious. Like they are the most erotically sophisticated of all of the blueprints. They're usually the best lovers of all of the blueprints. And the reason being is that they can mold themselves. They can shapeshift to be whatever their partner is. So if you're a sensual, they'll shapeshift to be a sensual. If you're an energetic, they can shapeshift into energetic. They can literally read people and are able to kind of mold themselves. Now on the shadow side, before I go there, orgasmic superpowers, because they have all of them, they can have all the orgasmic superpowers too. So
yeah.
Yay, shapeshifters.
Congrats, shapeshifters.
Not a shapeshifter. Yeah, congrats to the shapeshifter. I'm not a shapeshifter. I'm a shapeshifter in my work, what I give. Like, I can give to people to model it, to teach it, like that kind of thing. But in my own personal eroticism, especially around receiving, very energetic. And I recently switched from sexual to sensual. So now I am more sensual than I am. And I'm about tied with energetic and sensual. And my least one is now sexual, which is really interesting. And it happened through healing. So I could share some of that maybe if we have time.
Yeah, well, that does answer the question that I had about whether or not you can shift. Because the first time I took the quiz, I was like 70% energetic, very highly energetic.
High energetic.
Super high. And then the next time I took it, I was almost equal energetic and sensual. And I was wondering why that happens, how often that happens.
Yeah, so your blueprints can change. I was pretty stuck in mine with energetic sexual. I had developed kinky only because my partner was kinky, which I can share a little bit about that too, because we were really on the different pages. We were really suffering in our erotic life. And I'm the sex educator with a bazillion techniques. I mean, I'd written 4 books on all these techniques. I'm like, what is wrong with my guy? I was a sexual going, what is wrong with my man? Like, I'm here offering him all the sex and he's just like, yawn. And it's because he's a kinky.
Yeah.
And, me touching his cock was not going to be the thing that was going to get him there. It was, let me get out the ropes and dangle them and then do some dynamic power play. So that whole thing was just this huge game changer in our relationship because I could speak his language. So I learned kinky just to be able to play with my own partner, and it shifted everything. And then he learned more of my language, which really radically changed everything.
So that goes back to the original question of what if you and your partner are opposite? And so can you help me understand what learning the other person's language looks like? Because my gut instinct is like, okay, when I'm in the giving mode, I'm speaking their language, and it's okay for me to be speaking my own when I'm in the receiving mode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's, you can work it multiple ways, giver, receiver, and that's a form of power dynamic as well. I think sometimes we think of power dynamics like someone is dominating me, like hardcore, but giver, receiver is a power dynamic. One person is giving, one person is receiving. So the thing that I say, once you know the blueprints, the things to do are to really get fed in your own blueprint. So receive in your own blueprint. What are ways that you can get fed? Maybe it doesn't require your partner, but how can you get fed? The next one is speaking. What's the erotic language of your blueprint? So that could be the words that your partner is using. It can be vocal tone. It can be body language. So there's many different things that we want to learn in terms of speaking the blueprint. After speaking the blueprint, we look at healing the shadow aspects of the blueprint. So the shadow, I was talking about the shadow of the shapeshifter, is that we shapeshift so much that we're never really fed in our own eroticism. They're the most starving of all the blueprints. Wow. Because they can shift to be whatever their partner is, but they're often not getting all of the full rainbow. They need the full rainbow in order to be really, really fed. Shapeshifters also have been told a lot of times that they're too much, they want too much, they need too much, and therefore, you know, they need the full keyboard, they need the full alphabet, and that's okay. Or they judge themselves as hedonistic, like, because I want all this, it's just like my sexuality is too big. Especially if you're a sexual shapeshifter, like sexual and shapeshifter, that is the biggest appetite of all of the blueprints, is the sexual shapeshifter. So the shadow, you want to heal the shadow part of the blueprint. So feed, speak, heal. And then the final piece is expand. So when we expand, that's what happened to me. So I set out to expand into Kinky with my partner. Mm-hmm. I learned Kinky. It still isn't fully it's a full-on super turn-on, but it became my turn-on. Parts of it became a big turn-on for me, and that was really fun. And then I want to develop my sensual, because it was the last piece that really felt like it had a lot of vulnerability in it. Like, oh, that's why I'm avoiding it, because it's intimate, it's so vulnerable. And so I've been spending almost this entire year just working on expanding into the sensual. And I think I'm pretty much fully there without a lot of sensual shadow. I had to move through sensual shadow of being really stuck in my head and nothing's right in the room, and my partner smells and he's rough and now he's like scratching on me, like everything. I felt like way sensitive to everything that was going on. But
I can so relate.
Yeah.
If the overhead light is on.
That's horrible. I don't know if you know sphincter law, but sphincter law is if there's bright lights, it actually causes your pupils to close, and they're a sphincter. So it causes your body, all of the sphincters in your body, to close down. So think about your vaginal canal, your anal, like all of that is sphincters in the pelvic floor. So bright lights actually cause a shutdown in the body because of the way that the sphincters are all in line with one another in the body.
Which begs to question, why are gynecological offices so bright?
Right. Or when you're giving birth.
It doesn't make any sense.
And we made it dark when I was giving birth to my son, because for that reason. Ina May Gaskin, if anybody looks her up, sphincter law, if you want to look up more about that. I'm a super geek. I study all this crazy fun. I'll never stop learning.
I love it.
In the beginning, all the stuff that I learned and some of my mentors, one thing that has been my motto my whole life is discovering all that is erotically possible. But what I've discovered about this personal mission is that it doesn't ever end, because there's always something new that's possible. And I think erotic mastery is when you learn and course correct, and just keep learning and course correcting throughout your life, because you're going to have multiple sexualities in your life. Esther Perel, love her. She talks about having multiple sexualities, not just one sexuality. Mm. I know my partner and I, we've had 5 or 6 relationships now.
Totally.
We're recreating ourselves all the time, and that's okay to be recreating yourself. I'm actually moving into a whole new sexuality right now. I'm in the process of it just in the last 5 days.
Wow.
Yeah. So this piece of, we're always shifting, we're always changing. And it's a question of, who do I want to be erotically? Who am I first? And then who do I want to be? And that's when you come into feeding, speaking, healing, and then expanding. And expanding is about saying, okay, I'm going to choose a blueprint. I'm going to expand into it. Expanding, we do something called erotic persona play. It's one of the tools that we use to expand into new blueprints. Ian didn't have access to sexual. He was 0 for sexual. I was 42% sexual. Yeah. So you can see the problem in our relationship. What did he do? What did I do? I started learning he developed a persona. His persona's name is Sly. And Sly is about reclaiming the taker.
Yeah.
Who wants to take sexually, who is asexual. And he started developing and cultivating that until now his sexuality in the sexual blueprint is now cultivated. Of course, now he's got that cultivated, and I'm 0 sexual now. So it just keeps changing. So
yeah.
To me, it's fun, because it's it keeps it always exciting. It's never boring. I just developed a sexual persona, right? About 3 weeks ago. We spent 6 weeks doing personas. And her name's Puddles. And she was kind of my teenage self and reclaiming a piece. Yeah. But part of it's also reclaiming delight, when you're just in that phase of everything is delight. Mm-hmm. And it was part of myself that I disowned. So what are the parts of yourself that you disown? That goes into expanding the blueprint.
I love that.
reclaiming those pieces. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to like my teenage interactions, the super enjoyable ones. Delight is a great word because it's just like so fun and almost innocent but exciting.
You're
And
holding hands, and
mm-hmm.
then you're like, "Oh my gosh, what's gonna happen next?" You're on the Ferris wheel. I was eating cotton candy. Like I'm a gluten-free like health nut. I went and Ian took me to the fair, and Ian took Puddles to the fair. We're on the Ferris wheel. This is like my worst nightmare, Jaiya's worst nightmare. But for Puddles, this part of me, I ate funnel cake.
Mm-hmm.
I got cotton candy. I got roller skates. Like I started roller skating. Like all these just fun things of like reclaiming. I wore pink. I even have my toenails painted pink and blue. Can anybody see my pink toenails?
Yeah.
That's Puddles. And
That's so fun.
I have my toenails painted in 5, 6, 7 years, you know, like that's fun. She's fun.
And so for anyone who's listening and they're like, personas, archetypes, I don't even understand what you're saying, different phases of sexuality, you can look at it in any area of your life. Okay, you're the student in high school. Being a student in high school looks like one thing. Being a student in college looks like a completely different thing. Being a student in grad school, a whole nother ball game. And then you're a student in your career, like you evolve and have these different forms of who you are. Same goes for in your relationship with your partner. You with that person when you're dating versus when you're married versus when you become a parent, you evolve. And there's no reason that you can't choose how you want to evolve in all of those areas and in this particular context sexually. So I think it's super fun and it gives you an idea of what it is that you are moving forward to. If you're like, I want to feel this, this, and this, I want to achieve this, this, and this, then that means I need to become what type of person? What's the person that has those things? It's Puddles. Puddles is playful and has her toes painted. So yeah, I think that's awesome. Is there anything else that you want our listeners to know about the Erotic Blueprint? I know that you have workshops, you have a course, like there's so many ways that people can learn more.
Yeah, so we do have the online course. We offer it twice a year. We also have live events. I'm hopefully working on a book on the blueprints, fingers crossed, so that might be coming soon. But I think the thing that I really want people to know is just to use it. You know, there's one thing about information, like we have had people just take the quiz and cry because they could see the issues in the relationship and why they were having them, or see like in the past, like, oh, why things didn't work out. And then, or just the feeling of like, I'm not broken, the validation for yourself that, oh, like I'm not weird, I'm not wrong, I'm not broken, like I'm okay. And here's like what we need to do next. So I just highly encourage you that you really deeply get this message. One, that we need to talk about sexuality with our partners, with our friends, as a community, as a culture. The silence around it really needs to end so that we can have education in the world. I believe that sexuality education can help deeply heal relationships and deeply heal our own shame and pain around our sexuality. So I want every woman in the world walking around feeling free to express themselves erotically and safe. Mm-hmm. That's the important piece. Safe to do so. Actually, I want everyone in the world, but women have become really my passion recently in working with a lot of women and a lot of couples. Yeah. So I want people to feel free. And men also, like, you know, if you're a male-bodied person, and all the genders in between, because there's many, many genders out there, that you feel like you can fully express like your desire and your masculinity and who you are erotically and not be shut down or shamed for who you are erotically. So I want everyone to be erotically free in their expression of who they are. And I think that starts with these conversations. It starts with the education. It starts with us understanding that, look, yes, we're all a little different. And that's okay. It's actually what brings all the juice and spice to our eroticism. Mm-hmm. And I'm just so passionate about this. Just like I can go on and on and on and about it, but I really want people to just get that message, learn about yourself, have compassion for one another, and less judgment, and really this language of understanding. And that's what happened for my partner and I. We love each other so deeply and have an epic, crazy sex. Amazing. This last week has been
I love hearing that, seriously. And I really resonate so much with what you said about people realizing that they're not broken. I mean, to go from hating sex, like, truthfully, I said no to so many people in my early 20s because I was like, you don't care about me. It's not going to be good with you, which I would still do now. But I did it even more so then because I was like, it's going to suck and I'm going to hate it. And I continued to, even with partners that I loved, because I just wasn't understanding what was right for my body. And to go from that to being able to have orgasms in ways I didn't even know were possible and feeling so much more empowered, it's life-changing. I mean, it's truly life-changing. I went from thinking, I don't know if I should ever get married because I'm not going to want to have sex with my husband and he's going to leave me, to now I know how to communicate what my needs are and I love sex and I feel so much more empowered. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And could have easily been labeled. I've had clients say I was labeled frigid. I was labeled asexual. I was labeled, avoidant, like
Prude.
All these things, like or sex addicted, like, I think some of these labels sometimes can be a little bit damaging instead of like, oh, I'm just an energetic.
Yeah.
That's a different feeling in my body and my system. I'm very, like, I don't want people to hug me. I didn't want anyone to even touch me. For me, I mean, I was like, no one could touch me. And when people touch me, it felt painful. Like I have a similar kind of thing. Or I'm just very aloof. So people would think like, she doesn't like me. It's like, no, it's not that I don't like you. It's just, I energetically am feeling everything. I feel more when I'm standing over here. I can actually relate to you and hear what you're saying than if you're like touching my shoulder, and it's just understanding that and then being able to communicate to people, hey, I do get turned on. I get turned on a lot. I get so turned on, as a matter of fact, that if you're 30 feet over there and you're playing with my vulva, I'm going to be more turned on and you're going to see things you've never seen before. Yeah. So it's just, now it's a different conversation than I'm damaged, I'm broken, I can't connect with other people. So anyway, for whatever that's worth, that was a big, big piece for me.
Yeah. One thing that I did want to ask, a little bit off topic, is, has there been something in your career that stands out where you were like, okay, this is going to be a scary topic. This is going to be a scary workshop to announce. This is really taboo, even for me. Is there something like that stands out that you're so glad you did release it or talk about it or whatever?
The stuff around deep trauma, I didn't talk about my own trauma for a really long time from the stage. I didn't share the vulnerabilities and for anybody who's been through trauma, just trauma warning, just want to put that out there because sometimes just hearing about it can really trigger people. So I do want to say that I went through really intense trauma as a child, major developmental, chronic, developed CPTSD. And I think the hypersensitivity that I have comes from, I see a lot of energetics who had a lot of trauma in their history, and I'm learning more about how trauma affects us and how we cope and what happens to the nervous system. And I think that hypersensitivity is because I'm paying attention to, is there danger? Luckily for an energetic erotic, it turns into, I can feel a lot of pleasure from far away, it's an antenna for both the pleasure and the pain. So that I didn't talk about. I just started talking about because I joined with some charity organizations that helps me. I lived in a shelter for a while, and that they took my mom, my sister, me when I was very young, and we lived in the shelter, and that was a big life-saving event. And so we partner with Women Helping Women in that, and I wanted to share my story. I felt like it was the right time to share my story, but it's hard. I have a trauma therapist who actually comes to the event because every time I share it, my body just shakes, and I have to have a little bit of recovery backstage before I can come back out on stage when I'm sharing some of those stories.
Wow. Yeah. But I bet that the impact that you have is that much greater because, I mean, people, Lewis Howes, there's so many people. What's that?
People see me so orgasmic and they think that I've just been this way, or they think that it's easy for me, or they think that, because there's just all the projection that can happen in storytelling of, I'll never be like Jaiya because Jaiya must have whatever that made her so amazing and she can have 50 different kinds of orgasms all day long if she wants to. And the truth is no. And then when people hear that truth, they go, oh, okay, well, she can do it. And she's still messing up things. I'm not afraid to show that, like, my partner and I we still have struggles in areas. There's places where we still mess up, but it's the recovery that is what is important.
Yeah.
And learning how to recover from these things. And then people see hope.
Totally. Yeah. And that applies to, like, communication outside of just sex. I mean, every partnership is going to have problems, struggles, fights, friction, etc. But it's like, how do you move on from those moments together in an even closer bond than before? And so if you can be, because most of the people listening to this podcast, they want to be better versions of themselves. They want to be, living their potential. And I think that this shows what's possible to do that in, like, a sexual space. So, yeah.
And it takes courage.
Yeah.
Your bold life, and it takes boldness. I mean, I've done some crazy stuff in terms of sexuality, in terms of putting myself out there. I mean, I talk very openly about my sex life, about my sex, heck, I share stories about electrocuting my vagina with new sex toys, and I will share everything. That some days takes courage, but that one's easier. It's like talking about coffee for me. There are the things that take boldness and take courage and really putting myself out there. Some of the persona work, very intimate.
Yeah.
And we do photo shoots and we take these big photos. But the thing that's scarier, I can take big photos of me being sexual. Whoop-de-doo-da-day. For me, that's what I'm saying. The courage is, I took a picture of myself crying one night over grief of all the times I'd opened to a man and let him drop me afterwards because I didn't share with him that I was vulnerable. I just act like, oh, I'm all sexual. You can just whatever to me and you don't need to fuck tomorrow. I had grief one night and I cried for hours. I took a picture of myself in that grief and I posted that. That was courage. That was hard to share ugly, to share or what I view as ugly. It's actually beauty, this grief that's coming out of me. But this not pretty picture, this not sexy pose, to share the mess ups, to share the hardships, to share the trauma. That is the courage edge for me. And that is living bold for me, is to really, for everybody to see all of me, not just the pretty, sexy, bold me.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that, because one of the tenets of the Bold Life movement, or one of the things I try and teach over and over again, is that being bold looks different on everyone. What was bold for me 10 years ago is, like you said, talking about coffee or whatever. Now it's like, it doesn't mean anything. And what's scary for me now is going to hopefully mean nothing 10 years from now. So, it's not about comparing. I don't want listeners to compare themselves to you or to me or to their partners, past lovers, or anything like that. It's just about, like, being more vulnerable for yourself in this moment. So, Jaiya, well, I'm so grateful that you came on today. I love this conversation. I cannot wait to share it with everyone. And do you want to tell everyone where they can go follow you and stay up to date on everything that you're doing?
Sure. So first, take the quiz, eroticbreakthrough.com/bold life. I am on Facebook. Just look up Jaiya. Jaiya is Jaiya. If you are on YouTube, we have a YouTube channel. It's New World Sex Education, in case anybody wants to check that out. We have lots and lots of videos on there. I have a whole bunch of books. If you look up Jaiya, you'll pretty much find everything that there is to find and play with. So good stuff out there.
And we will have all of that linked up in the show notes as well.
Great.
Awesome. Jaiya, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you everyone who listened, because we're getting it out there. Go have a conversation about sex. That's my homework.
I like that.
Go talk about it.
Go talk about sex. Big thanks to Jaiya for coming on today's show. How fascinating was that? I seriously love this content so much, and I wish that I had been able to pick Jaiya's brain for far longer. If you want to discover your own erotic blueprint and you haven't yet taken the quiz, head over to eroticblueprint.com/boldlife. And to get access to the rest of the authors and resources that we discussed in today's show, go to theboldlifemovement.com/082. If you loved today's episode, please take a screenshot and tag me in it on Instagram. My handle is @theboldlifemovement. As always, thank you so much for listening. I love you guys. And until next time, go out there and be bold enough to talk about your desires and know that you're worthy, you are loved, and you are well supported. Love you guys.